Well, hi everybody, I'm Mark Chaffadini. I'm with Go See Talk. I'm here with Maestro Richard Kaufman back at the Dallas Symphony. Richard, so glad to be speaking with you again.
Maestro, I just love it when you call me that.
I wonder, how does somebody get that? Is it an affectionate term? Is it like a PhD or a doctorate? Or?
You know, it's just what conductors are called, and I always feel a little strange. I'm not even Italian, so, Richard is fine.
Okay, excellent, excellent.
Sure.
Well, Richard is here, on camera or Richard? Richard is here for the Symphonic Oscars at the Dallas Symphony. It's a tribute to Oscar-winning themes from a variety of well-known and iconic symphony composers. So let's talk about the set list.
Okay.
What role did you play in assembling that?
I assembled the whole show, and I have to tell you that the show is actually, as I put it together, called Symphonic Hollywood.
Okay.
And somehow, I'm not sure who, but someone at the orchestra decided that using the word Oscar would be sort of a really good thing to do. Unfortunately, a lot of the music was either not nominated for an Oscar or was nominated for an Oscar, but not everything was. So to call the show Symphonic Oscars is not really true. And so we should refer to it as Symphonic Hollywood no matter what anybody else says.
I will change every line of text in this interview in my transcription.
Oh, you don't have to.
Well, let's talk about, this is the second night in a 3-night sequence.
Actually, 4.
Oh,
we
really?
did a program at Duncanville High School Thursday night.
Okay.
The same program, Symphonic Hollywood. And last night here at the Meyerson, tonight at the Meyerson, and then tomorrow afternoon here. Okay. So it's actually 4 concerts, which is great because it gives the orchestra a chance to really sort of digest the music and dig down a little bit deeper, in all of that. And so that's, really a good thing to be able to do 4 performances.
Well, there is one specific cue, the Shark Cage Fugue.
Yes.
Richard, of course, played on the Jaws soundtrack. Awesome.
Yes.
I've heard that's
not. And I've not gone in the ocean since, by the way.
But you've flown over it many times.
I've flown over it, yes. Just saying, keep flying, keep flying.
Well, a little bird told me that it's not the easiest piece to play. So how did you select that one? And are rumors true? Is it very difficult?
It is. It's a difficult piece. I mean, this orchestra, for example, plays Bruckner and Mahler and Mozart and the rest. So they can play anything. The Shark Cage Fugue, and it's actually 2 sections. It's a 2-movement suite, and the second movement has 2 sections. One is called Out to Sea, when everything is going very well, and the boats are going out, into the ocean and all that sort of thing, and nothing is terribly wrong at that point. And then the Shark Cage Fugue, where things are not so good because there's this guy, the shark, and its tempo is very important, because it needs to not be too fast for a couple of reasons. First of all, you can't play it and have everything fit the way John Williams wants it to. But also it needs to have that anchor of intensity in the music, so that it's always, this feeling of solidity, and it's never kind of bouncing across the water, as it were. And so it needs to be rehearsed carefully and in a certain way. I rehearsed sections of it first so that people could be comfortable and also could hear what other parts of the orchestra are doing, because that's really important to know how what you're doing. If somebody has a half note, 1, 2, 1, 2, and somebody else is going da-da-da-dum, ba-dum, bum, ba-da-da-da-da-dum, bum, bum, the half notes have got to be right metronomically where they need to be, or the people will not have enough time or too much time to play the moving line.
Understood. Well, I talked to Harry Gregson Williams, and he talked about how studio musicians, they play to a tick.
Click.
Click. They have headphones. So how is that different in a live orchestra versus how the session players work?
All rhythm is interior, and it's a matter of listening, a matter of feeling this steady rhythm going on. The click in the studio, for a couple of reasons. First of all, the orchestra is more spread out because of separation of sound. You may have the brass all the way on the other side. We recorded the score at Fox, and it's a big stage, and the brass were in a different area code than the strings. And so also in a situation in the studio, you sit down, you open the page, and there's music you've never seen, and 10, 15 minutes later, you need to be recording it as if you've played it all your life.
Gotcha.
And so to have that tool of the click is really helpful, especially in something very metronomic. If it's something very flowing, then it's nice to have more, flexibility and liquidity.
Gotcha. Well,
liquidity? That's good, right?
That's a good one. Yeah, not quite the word of the day, but it's a good one. When you're on stage and you put this list together, is it a set list, a playlist? What is the official?
It's a program order. It's basically first half, second half, and I believe a concert should be around 2 hours, which includes intermission.
Gotcha.
And there needs to be a flow to it. And so the audience is taken on a journey, and you're not playing, a lot of real slow music one after the other, and then a lot of real big fast music together. And part of the reason is survival of the brass. I mean, if you play Superman, Jaws, Star Wars, The Force Awakens, Star Trek, one after the other, the brass players will basically be lying dead on the floor. And so there are these moments, these oases I call them, where the brass get a respite, and they can kind of sit back and we'll play Romeo and Juliet, or we'll play music of Henry Mancini, something real pretty. It's all planned physically, mentally, musically, very carefully.
So of the play order, there's a bunch of notable composers, Nino Rota, Alan Silvestri. What are you most excited about, and what sounds better live than it does in, say, if you were to put the CD in a record in a player or a
I don't think it's the matter that it sounds better. I think that it's hearing music live and seeing the orchestra perform it is always a unique experience. Mm-hmm. I think that one of the exciting things about this type of concert is that, as you said, you present music of some of the greatest film composers who ever lived. John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith, Alan Silvestri, I think is great. Bruce Broughton. We're doing music of Bruce Broughton, who I believe is probably the most underrated film composer of all time. He is a master of film music composition, and we're playing young Sherlock Holmes and also Harry and the Hendersons, which sounds as if Mozart could have written it in that style. Bruce is he is just extraordinary. And Alan, again, Father of the Bride, every time I either see the movie or hear the score or conduct the score, I've got like this tear because my daughter got married 4 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And like any parent with a child, or most parents, I guess, with a child who's been married, it just can't help but touch you. And Alan's music does that. I mean, with Forrest Gump, Back to the Future, and all of that. Nino Rota is a fascinating composer, and the piece we're playing, the song "A Time for Us," which was the theme from the 1968 Romeo and Juliet that Zeffirelli directed. And Henry Mancini had this wonderful recording, won a Grammy Award and all that. And we're actually playing the actual arrangement that Henry used when he would do concerts. And with all the music. I mean, I really believe that you have to either play the real deal or just don't. Because there are some arrangements where they can take something and try to make the wheel rounder. And it's not going to happen with people like Jerry Goldsmith and John Williams and Alan Silvestri and Bruce and all this. I mean, so that's another part of the exciting part of programming the concerts like this that I really love. But one of the tough things is what not to play. I mean, there's so much music, and if I programmed everything that I wanted to play, I'd be here for 2 weeks. Which would be okay with me, but and probably the concessions, but other than that, I think it'd be kind of tough. But I'm like a kid in a candy store. I've always loved film music like you. And the idea that I played violin in the studios for a lot of years, about like 9 years, and then supervised music at MGM. I have a lot of friends who are film composers, and I've always loved film music. I've listened to it since I was a kid, and the idea that you can present it in a live situation with some of the great orchestras in the world is just, it's sort of, I have to pinch myself. Last week, with the Chicago Symphony, we did the world premiere of the entire score of Silverado with the film.
Mm-hmm.
And Bruce was there, we did a pre-concert talk, and it was so exciting. It was just fantastic. And then 2 weeks before that, or a week before that, with the Cleveland Orchestra, we did The Bride of Frankenstein, the great Franz Waxman score. And so audiences are having an opportunity to experience this music in a way they never have. Most people, I'm going on and on here.
No, go for it.
Most people have not seen a lot of these films on the big screen. Bride of Frankenstein, Casablanca, Psycho, you know, you see it on TV and all that sort of thing, but, you know, to see it on the big screen with the orchestra playing live is unique and gives the listener the opportunity to hear what the composer really meant, as opposed to having the music buried underneath dialogue and sound effects and helicopters and motorcycles and press.
Well, that's what I'm curious about is, you're the conductor, you're keeping tabs on everything, you're kind of running the show. How many times during a performance does your mind go back to what you as a violin player did as a session musician? Or,
constantly.
Okay.
Constantly. The whole idea of the sound that an orchestra makes in film music, in a lot of ways, I mean not a lot of ways, in some ways, is different than what a symphony orchestra does when it's playing Brahms and Beethoven and Mozart and the rest. Studio orchestras have got to put on a lot of hats very quickly, a lot of different genres. If it's romantic, it's really romantic. If it's, you know, suspenseful and horrific like Jaws, I mean, you really have to dig down at that moment. And I've told string sections that, you know, play like a soloist, but sound like an orchestra.
Okay.
And a lot of orchestral musicians are taught to blend, but you can blend and still play, you know, with great, you know, vibrancy, enthusiasm, a different kind of vibrato, like the kind Felix Slatkin had with the Alfred Newman films, you know, where there's an intensity going on that you wouldn't normally do in a symphony orchestra setting. And the way people write, you know, in film music, for French horns and first trumpet, I mean, there are just all sorts of very bright colors that need to happen because it's accompanying the action. It's, you know, and it needs to happen right then and there with not a lot of rehearsal, because the concerts I do are not given a lot of rehearsal. And so, you know, the orchestra really needs to attack the music in a lot of different emotions. So my job is to bring that out, and the way I do it is to, okay, what would I have done? How would I play this passage? What would I expect to hear from the other parts of the orchestra?
Gotcha. Well, I would expect that we're going to hear a whole lot of great music. Let's start just very quickly at the top of the play order.
Okay.
To Hooray for Hollywood.
Hooray for Hollywood. John Williams did this, the quintessential piece of music that if you hear it and close your eyes, there's the Hollywood sign. There's Hollywood and Vine, you know, there's no question about it. So we start off with that. Excuse me. And then Romeo and Juliet, A Time for Us, which is just gorgeous, and it kind of, you know, sort of settles us in for everything to come. And
gives the brass a rest, like you were talking about.
It gives the brass a rest, although they're sort of already rested. They haven't played a whole lot yet. They will. So that's the way we start the concert.
Excellent, excellent.